it's very important for writers, whether young or older, to have an audience, to have people who are sympathetic and supportive, but also fellow writers who have critical ideas and constructive suggestions. It's very good to have other people reading your work. There are many, many ways in which it's very instructive. And the most obvious way is sometimes a reader just doesn't know what's happening in a story and doesn't understand what the writer's trying to do. When we read a work of fiction, we don't know the intention of the writer. So editors receive material all the time, and we may reject material that's potentially very good, but we don't understand it, or something's been left out, or it's the wrong title, or something's wrong with it. But in a workshop, the writer can be asked. We can ask, what did you mean by this, and why is this title what it is, and why did you end it this way? And in a discussion, the writer may learn that his or her intention did not come through at all, that people don't understand what happened, that the main part of the story has been sort of left out. Sometimes a new writer will want to not be too obvious or too explicit, and so the story might be too subtle. So the workshop is a way where you get feedback from interested and intelligent readers. And I find the workshops amazing because the young writers in my workshops often behave like editors. They're very, very sophisticated in the way they're looking at the structure of work. And I think very supportive and warm and really a friendly atmosphere. And I think very necessary for writers to feel that their work is wanted and it's interesting and people will applaud it and laugh at it when it's funny. And so it's part of just the experience of writing. So with our reduced but exemplary writing workshop, we're going to discuss two stories today. First, we're going to take up Lindsay's story, Labor Day. And so instead of there being like 10 other people here to discuss it, there's basically Corey. So you're going to have to stand in for a lot of other people.
I'll do my best.
Corey and I will just have sort of a discussion about it, and you can listen. But we can ask you questions also. Okay, so I'm just going to ask Corey, what was your reading experience? Did you like the story?
Yeah, I loved it. I think the best place to start on it is the level of experience, just because it's on an affect level, it's very funny moment by moment. I laughed often reading it, and it's also paced very quickly.
Yes. Yes.
To the point that I mean, it's a page turner for a short story, which is quite a feat. And then, like, as I was reading it and thinking, oh, this is a comedic sort of jaunt into almost like a comedy of manners type situation, all of a sudden it started to descend into what I would pretty much describe as a horror scene.
Yeah.
It very quickly becomes traumatic with details of like almost like viscera, and she's trapped in this house, right? So I think it almost has some like gothic elements, maybe possibly not gothic so much as horror elements. And then I was joking earlier about how it's also sort of like a heist narrative, because you got to get in there, get that drive jacket, and escape with like unscathed.
Yes.
So I actually think it's a very enjoyable read on the level of affect, and I had a wonderful experience reading it.
Now, I like your description of it being like a heist.
Yeah.
Because we come into the story in the consciousness of this protagonist, and she has her intention. She wants to steal back her own jacket.
Right.
But she almost forgets about it a little bit, and then she actually does it. So there's a little feeling like of satisfaction when she does it. That's a good point. And then what do you think of the movie Grizzly, watching this movie?
Yeah, so that's one of the there are earlier cues, but one of the earliest cues that the sort of interior struggles of our main character, our protagonist, are revolving around death, I think, because there's this movie Grizzly Man, which is that famous Werner Herzog movie about the very passionate filmmaker who's devoured by bears. And they're sort of watching it kind of callously, and the narrator seems... The thing about this narrator is she is astute and observant, and I think even says explicitly, I feign naivete rather than sort of share my thoughts on things. So that's one of those moments where she is like clearly observing the sort of
Yes.
something sadistic about these people sitting around watching like grizzly bear, but she won't remark on that.
Yes.
And I thought those were actually very powerful moments in the story because you're getting an interiority that's observing something sort of critically and at a remove, and it created a lot of humor.
Right. Well, there's a whole, almost like an archetype or a tradition of undercutting the idea of man and nature by showing, like Into the Wild was another film
Yeah.
based on a memoir or maybe a book about somebody who goes into the wild and he's not really prepared and he's sort of naive. He's maybe a student at Berkeley or somewhere. He decides just to go backpacking and he's not prepared. But in that movie, he starves to death, I think, or he eats something. He's desperate, and so he eats something that's poisonous. And these movies, they seem to be movies, they undermine the idea of that we can go into nature, or that if you go into nature, you're so silly, or you deserve to die, you deserve to starve to death, or you deserve to be eaten by a bear, you know. I'm making a lot of this because the author, who's actually right here, the author puts the movie in very pointedly.
Yeah.
It's like your demonized pigs in your story from the Bible. These are inserts with a lot of symbolic weight. Okay, so
there's actually film references throughout. This is a very sort of LA story.
yes.
And all of them are, I think, significant and well portrayed. I mean, I would love to talk to you about your relationship with the movie Grizzly Man, and if you were kind of drawing on these same resonances that
Yeah.
Joyce pointed out.
Do you want to say just a few words why you put Grizzly Man?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you guys talk because I think sometimes I write a little bit intuitively or associatively. So I think I put that in there kind of thinking that she was on this Goldilocks and the Three Bears sort of, fairy tale.
Oh, yeah,
trip.
that's good.
But
is good.
I like that. I feel like all of that was in there as
Yeah.
well. Like I didn't really understand when I was writing the relationship with naivete and how that was playing back and forth. So, yeah.
No, I like that sort of connotation of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. That's very good too. She's coming into their household and she actually sleeps with them, and yeah, that's really good.
When the story starts, there's a possibility she's driving down and they could have a threesome, right? That's the comedy of the story, and then it becomes her hanging this dress. And it's like one of the culminating moments of this story, I would say. And she's hanging this dress, and she just talks about how she's good at it, right? She's like, I'm good at it, and I know how to communicate with the person I'm pinning this dress on. And she's like completely confident in that moment. And I think the more interiority you can get from this character, the better, because it's just, that might change the style a bit, but it's just she has a strong personality, and the moments that it does shine through are delightful. Where's that section that I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about.
So
right?
16?
Yes.
Yeah. She said, I know that I'm good at it, and I know that I'm good at it. It's one of the few parts of the story where she has a real self-assertion.
Yeah, down here on 16. Do you want to read it, Lindsay? Is that how we should do this?
Oh, should I read it aloud?
Okay, good idea.
I knew I was good at what I was doing. I'm good at draping fabrics over people. I'm good at determining whether people want to hide or stand out, or what parts of themselves they want to hide and what parts of themselves they want to stand out. I started off by trying to conceal Ilsa's hips, the hips that gave away her age. But then, by the way her stance shifted, I could tell she felt uncomfortable with the way the dress was falling on her. And I understood she liked this part of herself, even loved it. And I switched gears and bunched up a fistful of fabric, pinned it, and marked it for removal. After the adjustment, she straightened her posture, and I felt her power in that moment coursing through me. I always wanted softer angles, but Ilsa wanted everything sharp and focused. I subtracted large swaths of fabric until it was an entirely different dress altogether.
That's really a nice paragraph, I thought. It shows the agency that she has really beneath her naivete. She's actually like a serious craftswoman or artist. Yeah, it was good. Also, her allegiance and sensitivity with Ilsa is so much more than with Cliff.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
So like the two women are having a rapport, and the man, Cliff is sort of boorish compared to to the women and to the animals. The animals are more sensitive than Cliff.
There's a lot of strong images in this as well. The pineapple is something I will not soon forget, I think.
Yes. Lots of sort of disgusting things. How do you pronounce that word? The food that they eat?
Oh, the shashuka?
Shashuka. We don't want any of that. We need to know how to pronounce that because we don't want that. And I love that line. I'm sorry, it's just that there were ants. And she's following the ant trail and she's cleaning that up. I thought that was very funny. She said, all this cleaning, I really could identify with that. But then after all that, there's still a trail of ants. That was very, very funny. Then one of the strengths of the story is it seems like somebody's opened a door and we're just in this room or this apartment and just seeing the way people actually live.
There was a moment where she's basically has to take a cold shower, which is horrifying in itself. Right. It's like the first thing that happens. And it's also a sort of a funny joke because the story starts and you think, it starts on the promise of a threesome. That's how it starts. I'm not the kind of woman who would participate in a threesome, which is exactly why I went. And then by the time she gets into the house, it's literally a cold shower that starts this horrific weekend that obviously doesn't end that way. And those are the kind of sort of embodied moments that kind of hit me on the level that Gothic horror does, the sort of affect level of just it's hard to imagine something more horrible than just taking a cold shower and then having to get out of it and put on your
pajamas, clothes,
which cling to you, and you're walking around sopping wet in some apartment. So I think, you have a great strength in that area of creating affect for your reader, which is just very, very hard to do, I've found.
Yeah, and then this little sentence just, I neglected to I didn't think I had to bring my own towel. She's not even complaining. She'll say, well, I didn't really think I had to bring my own towel. I thought that was very much in character. Well, I often ask a writer what the story means to him or her. Is this an early draft of a work that you think of you working on, or is it something you've already been working on for a long time? Is it something that you care a lot about? Is it maybe part of a novel? So is it something new to you, or is it more old?
Yes, no, it's very new. I think I wrote it this month. So,
good.
Yeah,
good.
So it's the most recent thing that I've been working on.
So it's kind of malleable.
Yes.
Good.
So I can take a lot of feedback on it.
That's good, because if you told me you had been working on it for 5 years, I would feel a little bit trepidatious about being critical. Well, I think Corey's remarks were really very helpful, very nice. And as Corey said, the voice is really wonderful. I'm not the kind of woman who would participate in a threesome, which is exactly why I went. I'm lately trying to be a different kind of woman who could pull off an edgy haircut, and I want to be the kind of woman who's going to do this threesome. So I thought the voice was really very funny and immediately winning. Mm-hmm. And I feel that the first person, which is Corey's perspective also, I feel the first person draws the reader in much more swiftly than any other technique. So that's very good. I'm Jean Seberg from Breathless in My Mind. I think that's okay. I feel that the story is best when it's sort of moving along, and I think I noticed the second time that I read it, maybe I read it 3 times now, the second or third time I read it, I thought it sort of lost some of its power at a certain point. It had a certain momentum in the beginning. So let's see, it starts to lose its power. I think we feel that Cliff, when she's going to meet up with Cliff again, we feel that something's being prepared that's exciting or dramatic or something, maybe repulsive. But then when they actually meet, it's really sort of anticlimactic. And it would be a little better if she cared about Cliff, or she had some feeling about Cliff that was maybe ambivalent, or she actually liked him very much at one point and he took advantage of her, or something. I didn't feel that the stakes of the story were maybe high enough to justify the length of the story. So we might feel that your character is moving into a situation naively and gets out of her depth, but we don't ever feel that she's in much actual danger. I would like to see Cliff be a little more of a sinister person, though not a villain or not just maybe more sinister. Did you read that story, Catwoman?
Yeah,
In,
cat person, yeah.
in the New Yorker, I'm sorry, Catman. It's Catman, of course. He pretends he's a Catman. He's sort of online. But when you actually meet him, there's something about the Catman man that is so absolutely creepy without being a cartoon. Like he's in like an achingly real man who's sort of mysterious, but then you see where he lives, because the story takes us into his living quarters and get a different view of him. And he turns out at the end to be like a stalker, and he actually could be a horrible rapist, or who knows, he could be a serial killer. I think that when the girl is riding with him in the car, doesn't she say, you could be a serial killer or some crazy thing like that? But with Cliff, we never really feel that there's much probably that's going to happen. So I would make that a little more ambiguous. For instance, on page 4, you have a lot of summary paragraphs. His money-making job, he worked at the Jones with the aprons. I'd be like on the Jones or the spaghetti. It's sort of chatty, but it's not. You're on page 4. I think it needs to accelerate a little more. And then Ilsa sells crystals. At least I think that's what she does. She ended an 8-year relationship. All this is sort of flat. It's a little expository. I never figured out how old Elsa was. It didn't seem to matter. She could have been 31 or 45. I think if there was some sort of sexual rivalry or jealousy, even though Bianca doesn't really care really about Cliff, she still would feel some rivalry with her. So she could be 31 or 45. That seems a little, perfunctory. Like if she doesn't care, like maybe the reader doesn't care either. I'd rather see that Elsa was of a certain age, but she seems to be behaving younger. And the narrator could very easily try to find out how old she was, just out of curiosity, I'd like her to be a little more curious. So anyway, on page 8, when Cliff finally embraces Bianca, how are you, threw his arms around me, kissed my head, I didn't feel that there was enough emotion. I didn't really see him too well. I think Cliff, in a way, is a little bit vague. But I like the idea that Cliff might invite a girl to stay with him without even telling Ilsa about it, as a kind of sly tormenting of Ilsa, having 2 women relating to him. That might be something that he might do. What I was going to suggest is that Raisin and Pancho could be conjoined somehow. There's so many animals.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's like a zoo in there.
And then Cliff has his accident, and there's the cat outside, and then the ants are, The story has a lot of what I would call bits. I'm not sure that they're integrated that well. Each of them is sort of comic in a minor way, There's nothing really absurd or monumentally absurd. A Donald Barthelme story might turn upon one image that's pretty absurd, but the stories tend to be pretty short, like 4 or 5 pages at the most. So I would probably, I hate to say it, but I would probably get rid of that cat. The cat doesn't do as, Pancho's eating the pineapple with the blood on it.
Yeah.
But the cat probably wouldn't eat the pineapple. The cat could lick the blood. I mean, you want one animal there to sort of react to the blood. So it could actually be cat or the dog. One is wheezing and snorting and barking. He snarled maliciously through congested nostrils, so you've sort of described him. Raisin is a 20-pound cat sprawled on a pile of Easter grass. Probably the story isn't long enough to have 2 weird animals, or sort of fat animals, and wheezing. But I like this Pancho, practice niceness. Not be nice, but practice niceness. And then the shashushka.
Yes.
So you have bits. You have the Natalie Wood. You have the shashushka with the mystery meat in it. You have the older actress. You have the trail of ants. You have maybe something else here. I would call these bits. And the pineapple, that probably should stay in. But I think that you have too many of these things. I didn't feel that the threesome was really a probability. It didn't seem very real. If that something was really going to happen, Bianca would be a little more tense, or they'd all be a little more nervous or something about it, or they'd have to self-medicate or something. It just didn't seem that this was actually anything that was really going to happen. You know, it's more like they might play cards together, and that didn't happen. It might be interesting if Cliff, as an actor, actually was a promising actor and had a bit part in the movie or something, and he was somebody who could become a real actor, but probably he won't. I just think Cliff has to be heightened a little so that we care more about him. Now, I like the idea of her getting the jacket. I think that's very important. Now, she gets the jacket, but then the trail of ants come after that. I think it'd be better to get the jacket a little later. And we'll end the story when she gets the jacket. Now, the older actress, I think Corey's quite right. I think she should just stay in the apartment and not get out at all. I thought that was a real slump. The older actress, it's like a coy suggestion that we're supposed to know who this is, but we don't really know who it is, and she's not in the narrative, so I think it drags a bit. And then on page 17, her insight about the clothing, I thought that was very good, but it needed something more after that Ilsa has to acknowledge that Bianca knows what she's doing, and that Ilsa has been improved, and this is really, it's really wonderful. So right here on page 17, you need some reaction to that. That's a nice paragraph, but then it goes too fast. Okay, then he cuts himself. I'm wondering if he could be cut accidentally by somebody else, rather than just cutting himself. Just an accident, you know. As Freud said, there are no accidents. They're cutting something, and whoops.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Here, Bianca, you cut it, you know. Ilsa's cutting it. Just, well, you do this. And
Someone's like implicated.
And so it's like the two women are cutting the man, and they want him gone. Then when he's gone, they don't want to go visit him. And like his blood is on the floor. Now, if this were a Gothic story, they'd both be licking the blood, you know, but it's not a Gothic story, so you don't want to do that. But I like the idea of the pineapple with the blood on it and the cat or the dog licking it. So, Corey, what did you think about the tarot deck on page 20?
Oh, yeah. That section, I think it's an opportunity. It's like a humanizing moment that Ilsa hasn't had yet now that Cliff has left the scene. I think that's this moment that this kind of oppressive, boorish guy has now gone. There can be a more shared moment between the women. So there's certainly opportunity there. I don't know a ton about tarot or like how it's supposed to go, or like there's actually a lot of references to tarot, like knowing references to tarot that went over my head. So I wonder if they could be possibly explained better. If you put our main character in a situation where she also doesn't understand tarot, then Ilsa can explain it, and you learn more about Ilsa, and
that'd be a good point.
And the reader gets those details. But there's I mean, it's an enchanted object, right? Like the possibility that's inherent in a tarot deck for a story is very high. Like the possibility of predicting death or foreseeing the future or the past is very high. So as an object, I think it's a good one. I think like many points in this story, like ratcheting way up, like even just as an experiment, might take you somewhere interesting, even if you have to scale back a little bit.
Yeah, well, you could write a whole story with the tarot being the title, you know, or one of the figures of one of the cards being the title. I think that in this story it comes in the wrong place, and maybe it should be another story, because there's a certain amount of magic and power, and it seems that it's not given enough attention, you know. So also, once she gets the jacket, I think the story should start to end. So you want to be careful about that positioning. I would cut the Tara deck from this story, but I would keep it because writers are like cooks. They keep everything in the refrigerator and put it all in the casserole. Like, what doesn't go in for dinner tonight? Well, it's going to show up next Sunday. So just put it, because your story has a few too many bits in it. You know, like she's sleeping upside down in the bed with him. That's another bit. You know, you have like 7 of these little things. But stealing the jacket and him cutting, or somebody cutting him, those are the main points, you know. So anyway, it was a really interesting story, and we got a lot out of it. The strength of the story is the narrative voice and the character. It's really a story about a very interesting character.